Hello, I'm Sinta Ebersohn from Get Up and Grow, and we're going to have an interesting conversation today about academic work and what we as parents should do to support our children, guide them, or maybe push them during the holiday season. With me is Melissa van Hal, who is a support learning specialist, and she's also a specialist wellness counselor. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Sinta. I'm looking forward to it.
Please tell us a bit about what you do and also what authorities or bodies you are registered with in South Africa.
Thank you. So, Sinta, let's start a little bit with what I do. I have two areas that I work in. The one that's the main focus for today is the support learning aspect. So I work with children from 4 all the way through to high school. I even have a few university students. And we look at how to guide children in the learning realm. We look at where their strengths lie, how to use their strengths to help them work with their challenges. I do a lot of workshops on study skills, how to study effectively, homework management, all of those different things that are very important in the educational sphere. My second area is that I'm a specialist wellness counselor, and we actually look at the wellness aspect. And one of my focuses is educational wellness and how we can create a space that allows children to learn proactively and in an environment that encourages them to grow and encourages them to be brave, to learn, to make mistakes, and understanding the emotional aspects behind learning, because it's not purely just academic. We actually have to have the confidence to learn. So my two spheres kind of come together and allow me to create a holistic sphere for children to learn in, which looks at their whole being. We do a lot of movement. We encourage using the senses. We encourage looking at the emotions we experience while we're learning. The second part of your question is I actually have qualifications in both education and in psychology. I specialize in support learning, which looks at, as I said, different ways of learning, but actually caters to all learning. So it's a more inclusive way of looking at learning. And I also have my psychology background. And as a result, I'm registered with 2 professional bodies. The one for the wellness counseling is the Association of Supportive Counselors and Holistic Practitioners. And I'm also registered with SACE, the South African Council of Educators, which is where I have the authority and guidelines from them how to work in my spheres.
Wonderful. I love that you have a nice, well-rounded, holistic approach to learning, which is exactly what our children need, the right kind of environment. So let's jump right in and let me pose the question. Should children continue with their academic work during the holiday season, or should they take a complete break from all the work? Or is there a compromise in the middle somewhere? What is the best for our children, and how can parents support them? And I'm talking about children who are going to traditional schools, who are in the mainstream schooling systems, as well as children who are homeschooled and in any other alternative programs, learning programs and curriculum. So should they not? What do we do?
I strongly believe that learning is an ongoing process, and it's how we address it. So I like your wording of a happy compromise in the middle, and I feel during holidays that should be the approach that parents follow. My primary reason for that is that if a child is continuously learning, they gain more knowledge and they don't lose knowledge, so that when they go back into the schooling sphere, they are feeling more confident, they're more ready to go back to school. But the trick is to use the approach that doesn't feel that it's an academic, and I use my little quotations, because it shouldn't feel like they're still at school. The approach should be quite different as to how we promote learning and education during the school holidays. But it is very important to continue helping your child learn and to reinforce learning and to reinforce the academic subjects. But there are so many ways that we can do this that are fun, that are encouraging, that are different, even for your high school learners. There are ways to do these that are very different, other than let's just go open up a study guide, which is perhaps not the most appealing thing to do, because they need a break just as much as we as adults need a time out.
Mm. Very definitely. And, you know, I think the rigid structure that we have in the school environments, for example, or even homeschoolers have a strict routine or schedule that they work with, is something that children and parents as well need to take a break from, because otherwise we face fatigue and possible burnout as well.
Yes, which is a very big reality. And we're actually seeing more and more children experiencing those burnout symptoms. So I think being aware of that, and I think that's where a lot of parents are like, well, how much do I push and how much do I not push? Because we don't want to create those fears where children are anxious and stressed over the holidays, where they're supposed to be actually relaxing and enjoying their holidays. I always explain to parents, you want to create learning to be a hobby. So when you're relaxing, if one of your hobbies is to knit or one of your hobbies is to go running, you enjoy it, but you're still doing it even over your holiday period. And if you can create that same kind of atmosphere with learning, it doesn't become a stressful thing. Oh no, now I've got to do this. So lots of things to take into consideration is how long should a child be focusing on the more academic materials? How long should their breaks be? And how are we tackling that? Those are very important things that we need to consider. And things that come into play, for example, are the age of your child, the academic strengths of your child, and their current sort of emotional relationship with schooling. Those two things are very, very important when you're looking at how to apply it during the school holidays. It isn't really a one size fits all approach. You do have to consider things like age and their current academic strengths and emotional relationship with academics.
I was also wondering about children with learning difficulties who are struggling. I suppose as parents, we need to handle them a bit differently.
Definitely. Children who are, again, that comes to the emotional relationship. It's not purely their learning support concerns or challenges or differences. It's also their emotional relationship with that learning process. The real trick comes in here is that they are the children that actually need learning reinforcement more than anybody else. But you can't overwhelm them either, because they will shut down and they won't engage. And then that learning that you want to occur so desperately over the holidays, because this is their time where they can catch up in an environment that's stress-free, learn different techniques that can help them in the school space. But you don't want them going back into school exhausted, because their whole holidays, they've just been engaging and learning. And I think that's a very important thing, because parents whose children are struggling, their natural inclination is, no, my child must now work over the holidays. And yes, this is the opportunity, but we need to create it in a way that the child feels involved, that the child wants to learn, and they don't see it as themselves sitting at a desk at school. So actually changing the learning environment is a great way of doing that. And creating spaces, like I like to call it, the growing corner for the younger children. And for your older children, I like to use words like, it's my personal development, it's my, we don't call it a corner, we tend to call it time or something like that. So you change the wording according to the child. And it also makes them aware that sometimes it's just a designated period. It's not their entire holidays, which also becomes overwhelming. One of the things I strongly recommend is not doing it every single day. And definitely now we've got the long holidays, there should be a week where children are not engaging in any formalized, structured approach in learning. There should be a week where they actually just get to play, learn through play, engage and socialize with their friends, and build that emotional harmony inside themselves that they need to engage in the learning space. And it's so important to create that. No child should be working throughout the entire holidays. We need at least a week's break where they can just enjoy being themselves.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I was about to ask how much is enough and how much is too much. So not every day, maybe every other day, and then to still have a week where there's no learning, no official learning. But also, as I'm listening to you, I'm also thinking I'm a firm believer in, cultivating a lifestyle of learning. Children are curious by nature. We all actually are. We just lose it along the way. And I think if we create an environment that's conducive to curiosity and seeking and discovering and exploring and all that sort of stuff, a lot of learning happens by itself without them realizing it. And as we know, children learn so much while they're playing, and it's a very good way for children to learn. Hey.
Yes, it's an excellent way. And that's actually what I call that week off. But for the children's sake, I refer to it as a week off. But it is a learning week because they're learning about themselves and they're learning about social skills and doing activities that are just different. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. We're looking at a continuous learning environment. The issue that that happens with children is if we say, oh, we're doing some form of learning, or we try target it in a learning way, they pick up on it very quickly. So giving them that freedom to learn themselves is amazing. I mean, just giving them a piece of paper, letting them draw, for example, or playing a game with your friends, all of these things are learning. They are fantastic ways of learning. We've got so many amazing games out there that children can engage in that allows them to learn, and it doesn't feel like they are learning. I mean, you've got your charades, for example, or your 30 seconds. We've got smart hearts. We've got all these different things that children can use and engage with that are fun. And it's not like we're learning. And I use we even have little things where they're like maths games, but it doesn't feel like a maths game to the child. I'm trying to think, one that I've got at the moment is Maths Whiz. And it's so much fun because you've got to try and collect all 4 cards before you get there. But learning in the kitchen, as you say, it's part of learning every day, cooking together, measuring, weighing the products that you're cooking, going outside and going shopping with mom. And one of the activities I actually do with my daughter is I give her R100 limit. And I say, right, you can go buy these activities that you need for your art project. And she has to sit there with her pen and paper and work out that it's under R100. And if it goes slowly over, she has to come negotiate and talk about it. And, these are activities you can do. Simple things like letting children find things on the shelf. You're engaging in problem solving. Which aisle do I need to be in? You're engaging in reading because they have to actually read the items that they're using. With your high school learners, it's a life skill. The amount of high school learners that don't know how to do basic shopping, letting them come with you and saying, right, I'm here, but you're in charge. You've got to monitor and do the whole process yourself. These are fun learning experiences, going to the museum together. Even going to places in Cape Town, we've got so many beautiful places you can visit. There's Exotic Animal World, we've got Scratch Patch. These are all learning experiences in of their own. So I agree with you in the sense that learning is an ongoing process and it doesn't have to be formalized into a specific time. Unfortunately, there are aspects of learning, and I know it's one of the big contested issues, for example, is times tables. It's a big contested issue. And I always say to the children and to the parents, times tables are so important because without times tables, your fractions become a challenge. And if your fractions are a challenge, then your algebra becomes a challenge. So times tables are a form of learning that are really, really important. Unfortunately, they're not the most inspiring or interesting thing that one has to learn. So those are the things over the holidays which you have to incorporate. And those are the ones that I refer to more, children should do every other day and not every day. Things like reading should be an everyday, having that time out and reading together, creating family reading time. You've all got your own books, you all read a page or so, and then you can engage in conversation about what you're reading. I think we need to create a different way of seeing learning and create a community with it.
I definitely agree. And as I was listening to you, some memories came up of what I used to do with my children in an age-appropriate manner for example, especially during the holiday seasons, if we would travel somewhere, I would involve them in the route planning and the navigation, which taught them to read maps and eventually went on to the apps that we get on the phones these days. But one would be in charge of navigating the route, and somebody else would be in charge of searching and finding for places where we can stop to take a break or stop to have lunch or something like that. And another example is if you're on a holiday with older children, you can task them with working out an activity for a day. So they have to search around to see what is available in the area that you are, come up with some suggestions, have a conversation and negotiate with family members about what we're going to do, and then work out how it's going to work. You know, how long is it going to travel to get there? How much does it cost? Get all the information together and then execute it, which is a playful and fun way to teach a lot of very important life skills.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually the kind of thing that I like to encourage with parents. If you are going on a trip, you know, engage with the children. And I love as well, because what you've indirectly done is you've incorporated a whole lot of geography and mathematical skills and life skills all into that. And the best part about it is it doesn't feel stressful for children. It feels enjoyable because they're a part of their family. And that's the idea that I was mentioning about the idea of learning should be like a community of learning. So I absolutely, thumbs up. I love that. I think that's such a great idea. I once actually, a client of mine, they actually create little booklets for their kids to do on the holidays. And they, for example, they're much younger, the kids, and what they did is they had a little car, and then they had little times, how many times they had to fill up the petrol tank. And each time they filled up the petrol tank, the kids had to color it in. And it's those kind of things that children don't see as learning. They see it as part of, oh, we're doing a holiday trip, and, you know, we're helping mom and dad see how much fuel we're using. And it's so important. And it's very interesting that you brought that up today, because I was literally talking to a client about that the other day, about how they do these things on their holiday trips, which I think is incredible. And I commend parents like them and yourself who are using those skills. I think they're amazing.
Yeah, there's so much that we can actually do. But if I could take a pause for a moment and ask you, what about children that are in remedial therapy or occupational therapy who have exercises or practices and things that they need to do every day or a couple of times a week? Should they continue with those during the holidays, or is it okay to take a break from those also?
I think, Sinta, what's very important here is to always liaise with the professional that you're working with, because some holidays they might say, no, this is perfect, take the break now. Sometimes over a holiday period, they have a specific plan that they're working towards. And to take that break may cause a step back or create a future hurdle. So to speak to the person that you are working with, the professional that you are working with, is very, very important to understand what the program is that they have put into place. Being a professional, I try to, in my programs, cater for those holiday spaces and allow children to have a little bit of a break. There are the occasional holidays where I might say, listen, it's a 2-week period, and this program, we really want to complete it. But then we look at how we can do it that caters in that holiday space. But I also design my program in a way that it's still enjoyable to do over the holidays. For example, if I've got a child that's really struggling with fine motor skills, we give them little squeegees and stuff that they can play with in the car. So it doesn't even feel like it's a program per se. So to actually liaise with the professional is so important. Find out where they are in the program. Is there ways to adapt the program that over the holidays it's fun? If you do take a break, how long should the break be? Most professionals do recommend we take breaks because we as adults need breaks. So I think it's more important to find out from the professional when's the best time to take a break. If you are intending on taking a break, for example, you're going on leave and now you really want to spend more time with your children, just speak to them and say, this is what I'd like to do during this period, and work with them. But holistically, and my general interactions with professionals is that we all do believe breaks here and there are so important for children as well. But to liaise with the professional that you are working with is my first step, because it would be very incorrect of me as a professional to say, no, take a week's break, but now this poor OT or speech therapist has got a goal in mind and they really need the child to be there by a certain stage. And now I've interfered by saying, just take a week's break. And that can cause a bit of a hiccup there. So to be aware and liaise, and if you have a team, which often children in support learning do, they have an OT and a physio and a speech therapist, to say, listen, can we have a team meeting, or drop an email and say, I would really like my child to have a break. You'll often find the professionals will agree with you, because we also notice the child's a bit tired, they're overwhelmed from the year, but having that communication is so important, and the team can decide together what would best work for the child and keep their growth and their learning and their support learning or remedial learning in place without losing the momentum, but at the same time taking in consideration the needs of the child in that moment in time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I agree with you. I want to go to a subject that's a bit sensitive for some, and this is when we have separated or divorced families. It's one thing to implement a holiday plan or a holiday program if we are all together living in one household, but it's extremely challenging for some separated and divorced families when the holidays are shared between two households, and some parenting styles are so different that they're actually conflicting with each other. And what I've seen so often with divorced families is that the one parent will follow a program diligently and support the child well, and the other parent would not be able or capable or interested sometimes of doing that. And then what comes up for me also is routine, like sleep routine. Can we talk a bit about that? What advice have you got, or maybe practical tips for parents to manage that?
I think the first thing in divorce cases that's really important is to acknowledge that each parent is working in their space. And it's difficult because we are different people in general. And as you say, we have these different parenting styles and techniques. Sometimes there are parents who literally may not be capable of putting things into place, whether it be their own emotional capacity, whether it be the fact that their work environment is much longer hours, whether they're even struggling with the ideas, especially with children who do have specific needs. Sometimes it's very hard for parents to understand these. And when you've got a divorce situation and you have a primary caregiver who spends quite a bit more time with the child, it's very difficult when the other caregiver comes into place and they're not used to the routines, and they're not used to the structures, and they're not used to understanding how or what the child may specifically need over that holiday period. And especially for the parent who is implementing the program and is putting everything into place, this can be very, very frustrating. And they are aware that it can possibly create setbacks. And what I try and do in those spheres is rather focus on the parent when the child's with them than creating the stress of what's happening when the child's not with them. Because you create more stress and more anxiety over the programs and yourself and your child if you're finding a conflict with the other parent. But other options that I like to do, and you can even do this with younger children, if you are aware that there is a parent that does struggle implementing programs or may not even be capable, is to create things that children will naturally engage with themselves. So if I know that a child loves building puzzles and I know they need to develop their fine motor and their problem solving, I would pack 1 or 2 extra puzzles to go with them to the other parent. If I know that my child is struggling with their speech development, I love to give them a little mirror, or recommend to the parents, if you know, give them a little mirror and tell them to practice doing their little funny faces to develop their mouth strength. They just will naturally do it because it's so funny looking at myself in the mirror. And to speak to the professionals that you're working with, say they are going to the other parent, and our parenting styles are very different, but I would like to perhaps implement techniques that they can, the child themselves, and even our littlies, there are things that they will naturally go and do themselves. If you've got a child who's struggling to read, don't pack in the hard books. Pack in a book that's easy, that you know that they will naturally go sit with, even if it's just a picture book. We're still reinforcing that idea of practicing reading. It's also important for professionals, if you do, in the case of professionals, we also need to try and navigate those grounds. So trying to include the other parent more, trying to find out how we can help them so that they can implement these steps that sometimes aren't being followed through in one parenting household. And sometimes that's very difficult, because I know there are cases where there's a lot of passive parenting, and that generally tends to increase over the holidays. But for the parent who is, and I always stress this to them, you do what you do in your space, and you do it to the best of your abilities, and you try and include the other parent, and you make them aware of things, and you try send things to make it a little bit more guided, but without causing the conflict, because it creates stress for you. And it creates stress for you as the other parent, that maybe my child isn't fulfilling all of these. But there are certain things where, and this is very extreme cases, and I have worked with one or two, where things are actually put into the parenting plan that if the child is with the other parent, they are required to do their OT exercises or their physio exercises, especially with children in the cases of cerebral palsy, where we could have quite a, they've got like muscle issues in their mouth. You know, to not practice those physio exercises or speech therapy exercises they have been given can cause very serious health problems. And in those extreme cases where it is extremely detrimental to the child, it's very important to have those implemented into the parenting plan, and have professionals with the other parent make sure that these are followed through when the children are visiting the other parent.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we're coming down to the needs of the child and what is in the best interest of the child. I've also had many circumstances where there's one parent who is engaged and actively supporting the child, and the other parents sometimes think that it's a lot of nonsense, or this parent is overprotective, or, you know, a helicopter parent, and all those things. So they refuse to cooperate and do things. And I advise those parents to also just think or consider the time spent with the other parent as the time off, as the break then. So you take the pressure off completely, you remove the conflict entirely, and you just say, okay, well, that's the time off then. That's where you play and you sleep late and you don't keep any routine. And that also helps. But while we're on the subject, can you talk a little bit about the importance of sleep routine? And if we know how our circadian rhythms work, the importance of going to sleep at more or less the same time at night, getting up at more or less the same time in the morning, and how that affects the working of the brain and the ability to learn. Because what often happens, and again, I'm with parents who share holidays, is the child will have a healthy sleep routine with the one parent and then go to the other where they allowed to stay up until the early hours of the morning and they sleep until noon or later in the day. And then when they come back and they have to get back into their school routine, they are literally brain dead because, you know, their whole rhythm has moved on so much. What can you tell us about that? How does that affect the learning? And what can we say to those parents who actually don't maintain a healthy sleep pattern for children?
I think the one thing, especially with sleep patterns, to remember as well, is that we do have some children out there that require more sleep or less sleep. I've actually done quite a bit of learning in this, especially because of ADHD children who really struggle with sleep and tend to have a big challenge actually even falling asleep, and they tend to naturally want to stay up later. Their minds are busier, they have a lot of thought processes going on. So it's important to understand that each child, there are guidelines that we work with that are very, very important, but to also understand that sometimes some children do struggle with that sleep. And it's not necessarily about going to bed at 8 o'clock and you must be asleep. It's about actually being in bed and doing relaxing activities. Some ADHD children can go to bed, and I'm using these children, or even anxious children, go to bed at 8 and they're falling asleep at 10 because of the activities going on in their mind.
Yes.
And what a lot of parents do is they'll be, oh, but they only fall asleep at 10, so they only need to go to bed at 10. And I'm like, no, it takes them longer to wind down. So if you're allowing them to go to bed to 10, they're probably only really falling into that proper sleep cycle at like 12, 1 in the morning. And now you've got to get them up at 6. So it's, for me, not just about the sleep routine, as in when we're sleeping. It's about what we're engaging in before we go to sleep. So understanding also that there are age differences, that children of a certain age need to go to bed earlier, and being aware of that. And I think it's important that parents do their research in this and understand it, because as you're saying, a lot of parents don't realize the implications of sleep. So if one parent is saying something, and the reason I say they should do their research is because usually if they read it themselves and they hear it from somebody else,
yes,
it's received better than you saying, but this is how it works. So I like to very much encourage parents who aren't sure on sleep routines, and perhaps are the parent that are allowing the child to stay asleep till 3, 4 in the morning, to go and read and watch some videos, depending on what your learning style is. Go and engage in a conversation with a specialist who works with sleep, or go watch some videos, or go and buy a book, whichever you feel. Go to discussion groups or a counselor, anyone who can give you that information. But what is important to see is that sleep is how we literally recharge. It's literally the time that our bodies regenerate. It's the time that our bodies process everything that we've been through during the day. So by depriving your child of a proper, healthy sleep routine, you're increasing their dysregulation, you're increasing their hyperactivity, you're increasing their agitation, their inability to process, you're affecting their processing. Sleep isn't just sleep. It's a holistic part. And I know we're talking about the different rhythms, but what I want to really stress in this conversation for parents where you do have this kind of concern is that I strongly recommend that if you do have a parent who is fighting you on sleep routines and making it very difficult, that the week before your child returns to school, that they are with the parent who has the routines. Because it gives them the week to gain that rhythm again, to go back to school immediately after a week where you've had irregular sleep patterns. You are emotionally now disrupted. Your learning capacity is at an all-time low. You may be very tired. Your energy levels are different. So my strong recommendation, especially in these situations where we're talking about the different parents, the week before, if you can, and it's not always possible, but if you can, to be with the parent who has that routine and sleep, because it makes the child's life easier during the school term. For the other parents or parents who have children who have difficulty sleeping, please, your child needs time to literally like decompress. And so whether you believe that bedtime should be at 8 or 9, it's still important that your child goes to their room at that time. There should be no technology, no blue screen, light input, fast visualizations. You can allow them to draw. You can allow them to read. But the most important thing is that they need that downtime. They need that decompression time. Their sleep will be healthier as a result. Their REM patterns, which is your deep sleeps and things like that, are healthier and better and stronger when you are actually, I'm trying to think, I read a study recently and it was very interesting. And they said that those of us who actually start our sleep routine about an hour before we go to sleep have better sleep. As in, we actually really regenerate better. So having sleep routines, whether it's we shower and then we clean our teeth and then we read a story, or you're allowed to draw, or whatever the case may be, increases your sleep, which increases your capacity the next day. Your cup, as they love to talk about, the emotional cup, is full. If you think about how we as adults are, if we're tired, everything and that's how I try and explain it to parents who don't see the value in sleep routine and who don't see the value in sleep, is that, well, think about how you feel when you're tired. Think about how agitated you are. You can't focus at work. You tend to feel pain more. Your pain increases when you're tired. You get angry more easily. So it's important to think about how you as an adult are, and then relate that to a child who's still growing. Their body's got to stretch, as I call it. Their body's got to stretch. And that goes also to the neuroplasticity that we need to talk a little bit about. And that's where our sleep helps us. And their body's got to stretch. And if they don't have that time to rest and grow, they are not growing in a healthy, conducive environment themselves. And that does create a variety of other issues, especially if you've got children in remedial. For example, if a child has dyslexia, if they are tired, their ability to read decreases drastically, because now they've got to process literally 3 or 4 times harder to do the original work. Whereas if they're alert and they're awake and they've got a healthy sleep routine, their ability to read is stronger.
And our sleep is also the time that our brain integrates a lot of the information that we took in during the day. So there's some memory work and storing that's going on there as well, hey?
Yes, that's also why I say the rejuvenation in a way, because what's actually happening is we're processing it and it's going into us. And then when we wake up the next day, we rejuvenate, but that information is actually a part of who we are now. And that also helps with your long-term memory and your short-term memory. Sleep is a very important part of how we function as people.
So that's wonderful information. Thank you very much, Melissa. I'm so grateful for having this conversation with you. It's enlightening. And I'm sure a lot of parents out there will agree with me. I want to just stress something. We've talked now about different parenting styles and the challenges that offers. But if we're looking at learning and creating an environment that is conducive to learning, because children are sometimes like sponges, they just take everything up because they're so curious and eager to learn. When we have 2 parents, they might have different parenting styles, but they also have different skills. So it's a wonderful situation where you have a parent that's maybe good at maths and another parent that's maybe better at languages. So there's ample opportunity for a child to get so much great support from 2 different parents at the same time.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that learning, you thrive best when you're exposed to a variety of different learning styles, different learning interests. And it is beneficial when you have that, because each parent definitely has their strength. And those strengths are where the children can learn and engage and develop from there. You often find also people tend to look just at academic strengths, but sometimes we have parents with the remarkable social strengths, communication strengths. And the other parent may be an extremely academically strong parent, and mathematically and linguistically they're strong. But then you've got this other parent on the other side who just has these remarkable social skills. And I think what often happens is we forget how important it is for our children to learn those skills as well. Learning needs to incorporate those things, and communication. You learn so much from a parent with great communication skills. I often see it reflected when I'm working with the children. The children who write the best debate essays are the ones with the parents who have communication skills that could rock and change everything.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we sometimes look at that skill and we go, oh, but that's really not relevant to academic learning. But it's incredibly important. Or parents who engage in critical thinking with their children. Those skills that we don't always look at. And I think parents underplay that value. For example, sometimes I have parents who are more into, I want to say, like their professional careers are, I want to say handwork, like your plumbers or your electricians. And they often don't see the value in what they have. And I'm like, but no, you're the one who goes in and looks at all these wires or pipes and goes, that's what I need to do. And I said, that is such a problem-solving skill. And for your child to have that in learning, and engage that with them, show them how you do the electrical works, talk to them about what. It's so engaging. I mean, it's incredible. And I feel quite sad sometimes when I have a parent say to me, oh, but I'm just a seamstress. And I'm like, what do you mean you're just a seamstress? Do you know how much talent and creative thinking and design goes into creating a dress or fixing something and picking the correct stitch? You should be using that as an opportunity to show your child, look, this item's been brought into me and I can't use this stitch because the dress will pull apart. Every career has some value in it. Even your more laborious careers, like your bricklayers, you can't just stick a brick wherever you feel like it. It's got balance. It shows diligence. It shows so many things. So I think parents need to realize that they have their own strengths. And they have their own values, and they need to acknowledge and see those. It doesn't matter what career you're in or what sphere you're in or how many degrees you have. You have so much you can offer your child, and the learning experiences that you can give them in the school holidays is incredible. If you work in construction, explaining how cement mixes. I mean, if someone asked me that, I don't really know, to be honest. So it would be a learning experience for me too. But it's still a whole concept. And I think parents tend to not see these things or see their diligence. I go into work every day. I do all these things. You're teaching your kid, it's not just academics. There's grit. There's resilience. There's all these things. And we as parents need to see everything as a learning opportunity.
Yes.
And I think if we start creating that environment for our kids, school becomes a learning opportunity. It's not just maths. Oh, this maths could lead to me helping my dad one day work in the electrical company. This skill one day could help me promote myself from here to there, and I think that's how we need to change things. Because one of the biggest questions I get from kids 24/7 is, how is this going to help me? I don't see how this is going to help me in the real world. Why do I need to do this? And it's the relevance. And I say to them, well, history teaches you about people and it teaches you how to learn from what happened in the past so that it doesn't happen in the future. Geography teaches us how we interact with our environments. If you can't read a map or you get lost, or heaven forbid we have a blackout and you can't use your phone and you need to read a map, what are you going to do? Or maths. A lot of kids say to me, but algebra is not relevant. And I said, algebra is very relevant because the X variables everywhere. There is that unknown that we need to solve and figure out. And geometry, understanding the shapes, that's all about how houses are constructed. And so I teach them that one day you will choose your fit, but you need to know the basics of everything in order to choose your fit. And I think that's how we need to change learning. And to help kids see, I mean, some of the greatest teachers I know are the teachers who take what they're teaching in the classroom and they explain to the kids how this is going to fit into their life.
How they're going to apply it in real life. Yes. There's a gap there, and it's important that they see that.
Yes. And sometimes something that seems like completely irrelevant, like, why should I be able to know my nouns and my verbs, from English? Well, that's how we can write a well-written letter that's going to get you that job that you really want. You need to be able to communicate. And maybe one day you won't remember what the noun is, but you're definitely going to remember that you have to place the noun, which is your naming word, at the beginning to explain what your sentence is about. And that's how you're going to communicate for the rest of your life.
Yes.
and understanding those things. And that's how I mean by incorporating it. Like one of my favorite activities that some parents do, and I think it's lost the luster behind it, but is getting their kids to record each day what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping that little holiday diary. And, someone said to me, oh, but my kid doesn't like writing. So I said, well, why don't you just get them to record it each day? So now they've got a little thing where they've recorded each day. And yes, it means that they haven't worked 100% on the writing, but they've still worked on memory work, trying to remember what I did during the day. They've had to order their thoughts. They've had to put it together. They've reflected on what they've done. They've looked at what they experienced. Perhaps they've even included the emotions of what they've experienced. And that's an activity you can do that's so educational, but doesn't feel like a learning activity.
Yes, and many of the things that you've just mentioned are things that are not measured on a school report or not reflected there, in any way whatsoever, but it's underpinning skills and abilities that is the foundation that really supports everything else that we need to do, and especially the academic work. It's wonderful. Yeah.
And I think we tend to forget that because your academic work stems from all those skills. A child who's going to do well in maths needs problem solving, needs critical thinking.
Thinking.
Yeah. And I think critical thinking is something we just completely undervalue all the time. And it's a necessity. It's an absolute necessity.
I totally agree with you. I'm a big fan of teaching critical thinking combined with emotional intelligence, the two together. And of course, problem solving is part of that. But yeah, very, very important.
I think you would love our sessions here because that's what we focus on as well. For me, it's a huge component, like when I'm working with kids and I see that there's something they need to correct, I never correct them and I say, no, you need to do this. I actually go, something doesn't feel right here. Let's have a look at it. And getting them to go back and investigate. Or if they say, oh, no, this is definitely this. And I'll have to go, well, why do you choose that? And getting them to explain to me and think about what they've done. And sometimes it's amazing how they can debate something and really solidify why they've done it that way. And for me, that's such an important skill. Or through that conversation, they actually start critically thinking about what they've done and they realize, maybe I need to change this, which they wouldn't have done before. And it also allows them the opportunity to change or think about things differently without feeling I'm telling them what to do. And I think that's something parents can definitely implement at home in terms of learning and growing throughout the school holidays, is when your child is doing things and you can see, oh, there is maybe perhaps a better way of doing it. Not to jump in and say, no, this is how you do it, but to stand back and say, oh, I love that. But what do you think if we possibly try this? What do you think? Like give them that opportunity and encourage it to grow. Like when they give you their response and they're like, oh, I really like it this way because it makes the light shine through. Wow, I love that idea of the light shining through. So you're reflecting their thoughts. And then you can say something like, do you think we could get more light? And that is probably the best way that you can help any child grow, is giving them the opportunity to critically think about what they're doing. And also the thing with critical thinking is that frustration sometimes comes with that. They're trying to maybe they're using a Lego or they're building something and they can't get two pieces to work. And this is where the emotional comes in, exactly what you're talking about, that emotional intelligence is to realize, oh, I am frustrated. I'm frustrated because this is not working. But to help your child, I mean, especially our teenagers, I think we negate the fact so much that they are experiencing so much. There's so many changes going on. And we expect them to recognize that they're frustrated. And we expect them to know that this is but they have so much going on. And so when they're frustrated about something, acknowledge that frustration. Say, gee, I can feel the frustration. Like this must be frustrating you. And allow them to also go back and say, no, it's not frustration. I'm actually just really angry because it's not working. But it's helping them process something. And that is like, so if they are busy playing, I know they love their games and they're playing a game and they're super frustrated in their game. Talk them through the frustration. Why are you feeling frustrated? What do you think you can change in the game? rather than coming in and saying, oh, you're just yelling and screaming and you need to go do some work now. Take that game, use it to your advantage,
Yes,
pull it in, get them
yeah,
off the computer, say, let's go talk about it. Let's see if we can problem solve together. First of all, you're getting them off the computer, but you're still talking about what they love, which is important. Plus, you're having the opportunity to work with them on an emotional growth level together, and you as the parent are there. And it's such an amazing, and talk about it and say, look, I might not know much about the game, but I have lots of life experience. Maybe we can put something together.
yes.
And you'll be so surprised how those can change the interaction that kids are having with you and their learning opportunity. And then when you say, oh, maybe today, later, we can read some stuff together and see what you think, you will find you have a far more positive reaction because you've already engaged with them on their level. You've already helped them solve this frustration that they were experiencing in the game that they were playing.
And it's so important that you mentioned that, because we need to meet our children where they are at. It's so important. Different ages, different interests, different, passions. We need to meet them where they are at and really get into their world, because then we connect with them and we cooperate, collaborate better with them, especially when we're solving problems. It's so important.
It is. It's very, very important. And it's actually one of the things that I also look at in my own work. I run a lot of, I call them proactive language workshops, because it's teaching parents how to use the language proactively.
That sounds interesting.
It's very interesting. I love it. And the eye openers for the parents when they're engaging in that. And I tell them, this is the wonderful thing about these proactive language workshops, Sinta, is that the parents can use it in everything, in helping their children engage with their learning more, helping them work better in the academic fields, helping them in social skills, but even building their own relationship with their child. A very simple example that I use very often is, most teenagers' rooms are a mess. And parents will come, your room is in such a mess, you just need to clean it up. And I say to a parent, but where's the proactiveness in that? The child now feels judged. They probably feel overwhelmed already by the state of the room themselves, which is probably why it isn't clean in the first place.
Yeah.
But to change it, like I say, look at it differently. First of all, I like to say, is my comment helpful? Is there something proactive that my child can do in that comment? And does it show some level of engagement where they can work with me? And if you have those three things, it's so helpful. So, for example, one of the ways of doing it is go into the room and identify what you really need help with, like that maybe there are washings everywhere. And then you say, it would be so helpful right now if you could just pass me the washing, because then I can go and help and put it out for you and your room will feel a little lighter. Now they go, oh, it's going to help my mom. The room's going to feel lighter. And she's given me something very specific to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. It's a very simple one, because obviously sometimes we also, as they grow older, we want them to be more responsible with things and target things themselves. But that's just a nice way. And it's the same with the learning. If you really want your child to be doing things, is to make it manageable. Don't say, oh, go sit down and do 10 minutes of learning.
Yeah.
It's very overwhelming.
I think there's a topic for a whole other conversation that we could have, the proactive language. I'm looking forward to that one.
Right. I'd love to. It's one of my favorites.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Can we just take a moment to look at this question of whether children should work during the holiday, to continue learning, doing academic work, and all the wonderful things we've discussed now? If we look at this from a wellness point of view, really holistic wellness, what can you say to parents who are stressing about this, who are uptight, who are anxious, who are worried? What's going to happen to their child if they go through this whole holiday and they go back to school, or they get back into the academic program next year and they've lost their rhythm, or they've lost their habit of learning, or they feel like they're behind now, they've got to do some catching up? What would you say to parents if we're looking at overall wellness. How can we cruise through this holiday and not be so tense or anxious or worried and concerned about our children?
I think for me, from a wellness perspective, especially from the parental point of view, is that if your child is having what I call a holiday that they feel content and they feel safe and they're enjoying it, and you're providing those natural learning opportunities, and perhaps you want to engage a little bit more with a little bit of reading, or maybe you might want to tackle a little bit of work here or there, you are already doing your best. And that in itself is amazing for your child. And if they can feel that you are picking up, that you've done, and you're taking those steps from a wellness perspective for themselves, you shouldn't be carrying the stress. You should rather be looking at what can I do in small doses. And I always say small doses, because if you set yourself these unrealistic tasks, I'm going to do 20 textbooks with my kids this holiday, and they're going to study for 4 hours. First of all, that's unrealistic for both the child and you. So to reduce your stress, be realistic in what you're creating. Don't overstress. Children naturally will always find themselves content and happy in a space if you create the space for them to feel that. And then learning happens naturally. So set yourself small doses of things that will help you feel, does my child have books available to read? If you would like them to read, make sure that they are books that are accessible for them to read. If you're worried about their mathematical skills, are you providing an opportunity a day for them to apply that? Maybe you're going to go to the shops and you ask them to read all the different measurements on the packets, and you say, well, I've got 2 500 mils. What is this going to create for me? Your teenagers, you can complicate that a bit, but small doses of practical things. And if you would like, especially for children that you want to have a little bit more academic focus, so we really do want them to maybe do a little bit of sums each day or a little bit of reading each day, it must be realistic. Remember, your child's concentration is the equivalent of their age.
Yes.
So rather set up every second day that they're going to do 2 times a day, 10 minutes. You're going to have a happier child. It's going to be so much less stress for you as a parent. Plus, you will at least have the feeling that you are achieving something, and that worry and that stress and that overwhelm will automatically decrease. Because my way of explaining it, and I love to explain to kids like this as well, if you have a health goal, and you want to go to gym, and whether that's to gain muscle or to lose weight or to just increase your heart rate, whatever the case may be, or I use with the kids, I say, you want to become a great soccer player. Which one's going to work better? You practicing your soccer outside for 10 minutes every day, or you once a month spending a whole day on the soccer field?
Yeah.
And that's how I explain it to parents as well. I said, you're going to have much better results if you have small, manageable targets that your child is happy, you are happy, than if you set these unmanageable tasks. So, and that's how I explain it to kids as well, especially children in the remedial sphere and the support learning, where we know they actually over the holidays do need that little boost just to keep them going. I explain it like that to them. I say, this is what's going to make you the best soccer player, or if they love ballet, the best ballet player, or whatever it may be, ballet dancer, sorry. In their love, in their, where their passion is, their love is. And I say, if we do the same with your work, so your reading, I think it's very unfair when we say to a dyslexic child, you've got to read 10 pages a day. It's too much. It's a massive struggle. If they're doing a paragraph a day, every day, I can guarantee you their reading will start improving. But if we're forcing them to do 10 pages, first of all, they're not reading those 10 pages. I can guarantee you, they told you they've read it, but they've probably read the first line, the middle.
Yeah.
We know. Or if they struggle with maths, giving them 20 sums a day, it's too much. But if you give them 5 sums a day, but they do it correctly and they do it accurately, you're going to have that consistent improvement. And I think that's what parents really need to see for themselves as well. And that will help them relax. My child reading a paragraph a day and they're happy, and the rest of the day they're playing and they're learning through other avenues, I'm already achieving.
Yes.
Already doing a great job.
Mm.
And as I say, if you have those situations where you've got one parent who is capable and one that for many reasons may not be capable, send your child with an easier book, send them with some basic maths games that they might want to play on their own. Then you don't have to worry or stress because you're already creating that sphere for the child. And if they've been doing those things with you and then you give them easier and more fun tasks, it gets integrated naturally. And I think that for me would be my advice. I hope that makes sense.
It
Small
does.
things.
It's so well said. Thank you for that. And I like what you said, small dosages. That
Yes.
makes perfect sense. And that's doable and achievable for anybody.
Yes.
I have a question for older children, teenagers, and even university students who find themselves in a position that I've seen quite a few of the last week or two. They've now received their final results or their school reports, and there's huge disappointment. The marks are not what they expected, or they are terrible, and there's been conversations and arguments, and they're in trouble everywhere, and then they decide for themselves that they're going to spend this holiday to catch up, or they're going to study this whole holiday to go and fix whatever it was that went wrong in the last exam or in the final term or whatever. What can you say to those very, very eager students who are want to spend their holidays doing that?
First of all, I take my hat off to them, and I'm very proud of them, and I think that's very remarkable. The second point that I really want to say here, and I think it's important for these students to hear this because it happens very often. They study incredibly hard, and their results are not reflecting the effort that they put in with their studies. There are two reasons that are, I would like to say, unknown to the parents and to the learners. The first one is sometimes it's not about how hard you studied. Sometimes it's the fact that you're not reading the exam questions correctly. And you're not understanding what you're being asked or how you're being asked. A very basic example, if you get a discuss versus describe. Discuss means to talk. Describe means to literally give details about it. So your adjectives, your adverbs, that kind of information. So if I get a question and it says, discuss what I'm wearing, I would say, oh, I've got short sleeves. It's light because it's quite hot outside, and I'm wearing it because it's comfortable. Can you hear that I'm talking about it? If I had given description, my top is short sleeves, it's dark blue, I'm not getting my marks. And it's a big issue, and it's something that I see so many times with my high school learners. Repeatedly, they come to me and they're like, I don't understand. So my first question there would be, have a look at how you're answering your exam questions. Have a look at how you're understanding questions. Because if you're going to go and study and your issue isn't the studies, your issue is how you're answering your exam questions or how you're answering your assessments, you need to be aware of that. And there are many, many people out there like myself and other professionals who work in this area. And it may be worthwhile booking a session or two to learn about those things because they're not taught in school. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, I agree, work hard, but work smart.
Yes.
Be productive in your working. Understand where you're coming from. The second point that we often find is what happens is these learners have spent 3 hours studying straight through. And a very scary fact, again, I'm going to say it, your concentration is your age. So your optimum retention of all that work that you've studied was basically, if you're 16 years old, I'm sorry to tell you, only 16 minutes of that study period were actually very effective.
Yes.
So looking at now in the holidays, if you're wanting to revise, break your study periods up according to your age. And I say stretch it slightly further because you like to pull that elastic a little bit. That's the definition I use. I don't know if we've ever shared my elastic, but one day I will. But you want to pull it a little bit. And maybe if you're 16, try go for 20 minutes to 25 minutes, but then take a break.
Yes.
And a break that doesn't involve your phone. Go make a cup of tea, go and read a book, go sit outside. And honestly, during the holidays, I wouldn't do more than 2 hours a day. So what I would recommend is doing 15 minutes, 5-minute break, 15 minutes, 5-minute break, and then I think you're left with 10 minutes for your hour. And that is very productive. So for those really go-getters and they really want to work, think about what your optimum concentration is, where your retention lies, and plan according to that. Also have a look at where you feel most confident learning. If you are a morning person, get up and get those studies in. If you find you more productive at night, enjoy your day, and then from 7 to 8, sit down and do a study session. Mm-hmm. But if there is that case where we get those reports and we're not happy, my big thing for all those high school learners and their parents is definitely investigate what the why is. Because if your child is working very hard, or maybe you feel they're not working hard, but they actually are, but they might not be working effectively. Mm-hmm. And to understand how they're working. And again, this is sometimes the time to call in these professionals like myself and other people who work with study habits, who work with how you learn, because it's better to have one session and get some guidelines, and then they can work through the holidays and do really well in their studies than spending all this time over the holidays and unfortunately they're not addressing the cause. But maybe, and this does happen quite often now, especially when I'm giving that explanation, they realize themselves, oh my goodness, I was studying for 3 hours flat. They can go and they can naturally address it. But sometimes they can't. And actually having that guidance to address it is key. And sometimes even the parents can help them with that. Look at their books, look at how they're answering questions, see if you can help them identify what's happening. And if you have a child who's struggling with answering questions, it's better to actually do practice tests through the holiday, practice exams throughout the holiday, than it is to do a study guide. Because they know the content. The content isn't the issue, it's how they're answering.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. And again, we're back to small dosages. And I think at the end of the day, it's about balance. So it's a holiday season. We need to rest. We need to recharge. And we need to have time to just digest the whole year as well and regroup so that we can start the new year with, new energy and so on. So small dosages and take time to play.
Yes, because playing is how we learn too. And believe it or not, for those high school learners, when you've studied and you take that break and you go play, your brain is absorbing what you learned because you're giving it the time to do that. So please go have fun, go and enjoy it, spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, because again, well-being is part of being academically productive.
Yes, Thank you so much, Melissa. This has been insightful, and I'm sure we've answered that question that I posed in the beginning from all different angles, and I'm sure there are many more to discuss, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I feel this was a great conversation, and I hope people can gain from it.
Great.